Thank you for joining us tonight. A very special welcome to Lamont Hunter and to Aaron Barnhart. Um, I just want to, before we begin, just take a moment to sort of set the table a little bit for this important conversation tonight. Ohio's death penalty is really at a crossroads. Support for the death penalty by the public and by many state officials is now below 50%. We consistently see the general public has turned away from the death penalty, largely because of the very real risk of executing innocent people. And so tonight we're going to spend some time talking with Lamont Hunter and his lawyer, one of his lawyers, Aaron Barnhart, about the case against Lamont. Um, Last month, Elwood Jones became the 12th death row exoneree. In 2 weeks, we're excited about that. In 2 weeks, we'll welcome Elwood and members of his legal team to talk more about that case and about what occurred. Next week, we're going to hear from Arthur Tyler and Vicky Warnicki to talk about Arthur's case as well. But for tonight, we're going to talk with Lamont and with Aaron. So without any further ado, I want to kick things off. Welcome, Aaron. Welcome, Lamont. Um,
Thank you.
Lamont, can you take us back to 2006? Talk to us a little bit about your life
Uh,
before the wrongful conviction.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for having me tonight. I really appreciate being here. It's an honor. So yeah, 2006, January is when this all happened. But at the time, I was just your average guy working. I had children, uh, good family, come from a good family. I was doing seasonal work like I'm doing right now, seasonal work, and yeah, just trying to make it, live my life. And my my girl, I was living with my girlfriend at the time, her children. Um, yeah, and me and my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, I was doing seasonal work, which is asphalt and seal coating work. Um, I had worked there for a few years at this time, and me and my sister and my brother-in-law, her husband, like I said, we were in the process of starting our own seal coating company. On a small scale. To try to scale it up and grow it. And that's what was going on in my life.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
So can we turn to that day? Can we turn to January 2006, right?
Yeah.
When the accident happened. Can you tell us about that day? Tell us what happened?
Sure. Actually, never forget the date. January 19th was the date. 2006. And yeah, that day started off like any average day in my life, any normal day in my life. Like I said, I was uh, the work I was doing was seasonal. In the winter, we don't work. Like now, I'm laid off right now. Um, because I work for the same company, ironically, that I was working for back then. Now I do. So that day, January 19th, 2006, started off as a normal day. My girlfriend wakes up. She worked up the block at a speedway up the block. And her two older sons, they get up for work. I mean, for school that day. After she leaves for work, she had to leave early. They didn't have to be to school till like 8, something like that. So they get up, and the youngest of the three, which is Trustin, which is the one who passed away. Um, I get him up, and my baby girl, I had a me and my girlfriend had a 9-month-old daughter at the time together. The other three children were not my biological children. Um, so they get up, get off to school, and I got Trustin together, put him in my favorite recliner in the living room, give him his sippy cup, um, some little breakfast toast, French toast sticks, and get him situated. He liked it trains and dinosaurs. So I put his favorite dinosaur movie on, which was Jurassic Park, which he had watched the night before. Um, so I put that on for him, and he's situated. And I figure I'd get my day started like I normally do with chores, cleaning up. The boys, kind of tend to have stuff thrown around and stuff like that. But I started with laundry, which I was left off doing the day before. So I grabbed my 9-month-old daughter, Trinity, and I take her downstairs in the basement to my man cave where I would sit to start laundry. Where I finished start. I'm sorry. Well, I left off the night before. So I go to I get her situated and start walking towards the washer and dryer area. And as I was walking there, I heard Trustin running across the floor above my head, running across the floor, which was through the dining room and the kitchen towards the basement steps, which were in the kitchen. And next thing I know, I see him, not the beginning of the fall, but the end of the fall, because we had a little wall on the steps that prevented me from seeing the top of the steps. And he come tumbling down the steps, and I run over to him, and in a shock, uh, 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 just shook, trying to check on him. Um, and when I got to him, he was in a bad way. His eyes were like fluttering in the back of his head, um, and I tried to jolt him to consciousness, like he was going unconscious. He was unconscious or whatever. And I panicked, I guess, and scooped him up, run up the steps with him, and tried to splash water on his face in a rush, and like trust him, wake up. And Trustin was his name, by the way. And nothing, his eyes were still fluttering. So I laid him down, and I noticed that he was having trouble. It was like he was having trouble trying to take a breath, like labored, trying to take a breath. And so I tried to do CPR on him, and I don't know how to do CPR. I'm not trained in it, of course, but anywho, I tried to do CPR on him, and when I went to blow in his mouth, his teeth were clenched like this, and so I had to kind of with my hands, my fingers, open his chin and his top mouth, to get his mouth open so I can blow in his mouth. When I was doing it, I noticed he had a piece of sausage from the sausage link in the French toast stick that I had gave him, lodged in the back of his throat. Well, in the back of his mouth, not in the back of his, so I plucked it out, stuck my finger in there, plucked it out, and start trying to do CPR on him, hold his nose and blow in his mouth and press on his chest, and to no avail. He still was like trying to, So I grabbed the phone real quick, called his mother, told her to get home, and that day started horribly. Like that's how that day started. That's how uh, that journey started.
Aaron, can we shift gears a little bit and talk about the process that Lamont went through? Um, can you talk a little bit about the trial, talk about like what the state actually said, and then take us into what happened next?
Sure. So unfortunately, Tristan never recovered from these injuries. He never gained consciousness. And he had what, if you're familiar with the term shaken baby syndrome, or sometimes it's called abusive head trauma, um, there's a term that believers in it, sometimes called the triad. And so it's three separate injuries, and Trustin had them. And so he had edema, which his brain was swollen, and he also had bleeding on his brain, so hemorrhaging. And then also in the back of his eyes, on his retina, he had bleeding there too, retinal hemorrhaging. Um, when shaken baby syndrome first came on the scene, if you had those three injuries, the triad, it was sort of like done. Like, you must have shaken this child, you're guilty. Um, as time has gone on, as more studies have been done, as people have started filming with cell phone cameras, um, this has shifted to try and maintain legitimacy, when it really isn't legitimate. But anyway, sometimes then they'll say like shaken baby with impact or without impact, because these three symptoms basically happen all the time when you have an insult to your brain, right? You get hit, and the reaction to that, if any blood vessels break, is blood comes out, but your skull is of solid block. You know, there's nowhere for the brain to go. And so if the pressure comes in from blood leaking out, then that's going to, like a hose gets squeezed, it's going to prevent blood flow, which cuts off oxygen to the brain, which leads to brain death. And any squeezing of the brain there is also going to squeeze your optic nerve, which runs through your brain into your eye, and that causes the pressure that leads to bleeding in your retinas. Other things that cause retinal hemorrhages are CPR, being intubated, like a whole bunch of stuff that happens to someone who, you know, goes to the ER. So the problem with this whole shaken baby theory is that a lot of things can cause it, in addition to abuse. Abuse also can lead to these symptoms, but it's not scientific, and it certainly isn't appropriate to say there's no way other than abuse that these symptoms developed. But unfortunately, that's what the state's experts said in Lamont's case. And also, unfortunately, he had a trial attorney who didn't do the work. He didn't look through the records. He didn't get his own expert to talk to about what the state was going to say or testify against the state. He didn't interview witnesses. And so it was basically like an unrebutted testimony from the state saying, like, what Lamont said about fall down the stairs couldn't cause these injuries. You can only get injuries like these from like a high-speed car crash. He must have like swung Trustin around like a baseball bat for him to have injuries like these. Like, it has to be abuse. And that was unrebutted. His attorney tried to cross and poke holes in the state's theory, but he didn't know what he was doing. So he didn't have the right language and the understanding to do that. So in addition to be convicted of aggravated murder, Lamont was also convicted of aggravated rape, because during the autopsy of Trustin, the coroner found what she described as three puncture wounds that were in the rectum, in Trustin's rectum. And they were just a couple millimeters big, and she described them as something that could have been made like a pencil. And Lamont had no explanation for, where these injuries could have come from. And so the state's theory was that Lamont had, like sexually assaulted Trustin with some object, and then, basically killed Trustin, after that. And that's what they went with. And that's what he was convicted of. And so then after that, the appeals process starts. And there's kind of two parallel tracks that happen in the state courts. And Lamont got nothing out of those. He has a direct appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court that looks at claims based on the record of what happened in the trial court. But unfortunately, basically nothing happened because his defense attorney didn't put anything forward. There's another track called post-conviction, and that's when Lamont could try to develop outside of the record evidence. But he doesn't have any right there to discovery, to question witnesses, to get evidence. And his post-conviction lawyers asked for all of this and were denied. And so that was that. He basically just, kind of rubber stamped his way through this whole process. I think that probably took maybe about 7 years or so to get through that, to finish in state court. When he was done was when my office, I'm in the federal public defender's office in what's called the capital habeas unit. That's when we can get involved and file in a whole separate court system, the federal court system, seeking a writ of habeas corpus. And now there's a bunch of other hurdles there because it's even harder to win there. There's laws and court decisions that have intentionally made it very difficult to win there. But we were lucky and fortunate enough to
Yeah.
develop evidence there that eventually led to his release.
Can we talk about the when and how new evidence surfaced? Because I think that it's important for all of us to understand that given that there are there are different tracks, right? Different rights of appeal. And so how does it come to pass that all of this time goes by and for the first time there is additional information? Aaron, can you talk a little bit about that part?
Sure. So, I mean, the very first thing that we did was to turn to experts because I hadn't, and no one in my office had ever had a shaken baby case before. So we turned to Kate Jetson. She runs the Center for Integrity and Forensic Sciences. And she's one of the leading experts in shaken baby, but also now their center, deals with a lot of junk sciences. And she read the trial transcript from Lamont's case. And she circled a bunch of stuff that she said the state expert said that's not true, that's not scientific, that doesn't have any basis that we can challenge. And then she said, you need this kind of expert and that kind of expert, and these are the resources you need. So I was like, okay, well, Lamont says he's innocent. Let's figure it out. Let's see what we can do.
Thank you. Sorry, Aaron.
Go ahead, Lamont. What?
No, I'm saying thank God because this is like I'm sorry, I'm gonna let you finish.
No, you can talk.
No, this was like the first time throughout this whole process, throughout all these years, that I had anybody listen, to me because, like Aaron just mentioned just now, a few minutes ago, my case took 7 years going through these parallel appeals in the state courts, and it's like Aaron said, rubber stamp, no, 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 and I'm like, what? And I'm, of course, new to all of this. I've never been through this before. It's all a traumatizing experience for me. So I don't know what to do. And, but to tell the truth. And the truth has been the truth from day one. And I told everybody involved, whoever came onto the case, whatever lawyers came onto the case, I told everybody involved, and I didn't feel heard until Aaron came onto the case. When my case finally crossed the threshold from state court into federal habeas court. And it was like a breath of fresh air. Like, finally, somebody's listening, because like Aaron said, there was no judgment of me or the charges or whatever. There was no judgmental attitude or nothing like that. But she just, went about how to figure this out, and that was the first time that somebody's ever done that. Like I felt heard throughout the whole process. That's all I wanted to say, Aaron. I'm sorry.
That's okay. and so in addition to getting all the right people on board and learning the science and that, a wonderful investigator in our office, Pam Swanson, started digging through the medical records. And she discovered in nurse scratchy handwriting that when Trustin had been admitted to the emergency room, there was a little notation that said that that the nurses had attempted to take his temperature rectally 3 times unsuccessfully. And then it said blood noted after that. So we were like, well, this is it. These 3 pokes with the rectal thermometer perfectly match up with the 3, puncture wounds. And
the whole time they had asked me, okay, since you say you didn't, okay, you're innocent, but how could you explain the rape? how could you explain these injuries from the beginning, even at the hospital? I talked to authorities there when we first took him to the hospital. They asked, questions. I said, I don't, um, uh, um, well, not at the hospital. I don't think they didn't ask those
Yeah,
questions
I think
because
like
I
the
didn't.
detectives.
Yeah, the detectives and stuff. But I didn't know anything about a rape or nothing like that until I was in the county jail and these charges came up, and I'm like, I can't explain it. What are you asking me for? And the whole time, that's like what the prosecutor and the state leaned their case on. Well, he can't explain the injuries to his rectum, so he's covering up, he's lying, so that was very, very, very frustrating.
And actually, if you start paying attention to other shaken baby cases, it's quite common that some sort of sexual abuse will be charged as well. The Robert Roberson case in Texas
Oh
has
yeah.
that. And that's based on a rogue nurse performing a sexual assault exam, which is not protocol. You're not supposed to just do that on your own. And one of the things, one of our experts, Dr. Janice Ophoven, who's a pediatric forensic pathologist. So forensics means, trying to figure out the cause of something. So not, and pathologist, that's another name, for like a coroner, someone who looks at the dead and figures out, the cause of death and things like that, but also specializing in pediatrics. And one of the things she told us is that, there's a lot of changes that happen to that anal tissue right around that opening after death, color changes and texture changes that if you're not familiar with it, you could think are abuse. You could think it's bruising or, some other kind of infliction on the skin. So there's a case in the South, Jeffrey Havertz, where I'm like almost certain that that's what has happened to him too. And that's such a powerful allegation because you can sort of say like, fine, even if I believe your story about this fall or, whatever you say happened, you can't explain the sexual assault, So that was just like, and you can't, and Lamont has zero idea what that's about at all. We found that and we kind of thought like case closed, but like you don't just take our word for it. But then we also, got a doctor. This doctor is incredible because he's not only an emergency room physician who actually had worked at Children's Hospital, but he's also a biomechanical engineer. And so we took him to the site of the staircase and he did all kinds of measurements and proved that a child of Trustin's height and weight and age, running the average speed could incur the kind of forces necessary to cause the injury in his brain that would lead to the results. And I can go on a whole rant about how Shaken Baby doesn't like apply physics at all. So they don't use biomechanical engineers, but we do. And so he was also so great, looked through the records and showed us other places where he pointed out, there's no mention of any blood when Trustin is first assessed. It's only after the rectal thermometer, so that shows he didn't arrive at the hospital, bleeding. It was only after this, which is so crucial because when we deposed the child abuse pediatrician, and I had noted that they do some assessments of rectal tone is what it's called. And I said, well, if they're assessing Trustin's rectal tone, like, wouldn't they notice blood? And she was like, not necessarily. And I was like, really? I was like, don't they have to get pretty close? And she's like, yeah. Well, she's not an emergency room physician. She doesn't practice. And our expert who does explained, no, this is the procedure. And he cited, the policy. They do an assessment, ABC, and it involves sticking a gloved finger into the rectum because if someone's unconscious, that's one of the few sort of clues you have to like brain activity and things like that. So 1000%, if it was bleeding, like someone would have noticed. So anyway, we get the right experts, we get the right evidence, and we show this evidence to the coroner who had, done the autopsy and testified. And, credit to her, she admitted, you know what? First of all, about the stair fall, she said, I didn't consider that the boy could have been running. First of all, no one had told her Lamont's account of it. So she didn't know that he had been reported running. She hadn't ever seen a picture of the staircase, which is very important because the staircase was against the exterior wall of the basement. And there's like a cinder block sort of ledge that juts out of it and creates a right angle. And when she saw that, she said, oh, well, that kind of matches this long linear bruise that I saw on Trustin's back. So she's making these calls with incomplete information and she owned up to it. And so she said, I'm changing my determination as the cause of death. She said, I'm not calling it a homicide. I'm saying it's undetermined because it could have happened the way that Lamont said. And then as for the wounds, you know, the anal rectal wounds, she said, well, I'm still saying they're inflicted, but they're inflicted by medical care, not, you know, by sexual assault. So that, you know, was really the breaking point because someone other than us said, you know, this is really important. And it proved that if someone had just done the work that we did at the time of trial and asked her these questions on the stand, like Lamont never would have been convicted.
And Kevin, and thank God, Aaron, excuse me, thank God, this coroner doing the right thing and owning up to that, you know, because it's what saved my life. Actually, finding that document of the nurse notes in the medical records was a huge break. But when we got this news, right? I'm 16 years in at the time.
I think 16 and a half. Well, no, 17. It was October 30. Oh, no, you were 16 because it took 18 months after that.
16 years into the case, I'm locked up and sitting on death row. And man, it's like death row, like is a very dark place, no hope. It's like, I took a lot of losses, man, a lot of blows while I was there on death row. And this was right after my father had passed away. So
a couple of years after that. Yeah.
Right after that, I was, you know, kind of like dark place. And finally I get a call from Aaron. I talked to Aaron that evening after the depositions with the coroner, and Aaron telling, you know, she's told me that the coroner did what she did. She changed her opinion. She's no longer calling this a homicide or a rape. And I'm like, goody, oh great. So I'm saying, tell the COs to come and open my door and let me out of here. That, you know, it's time to go, right? So Aaron was like, whoa, hold on, my wait. We have to, you know, it's procedures, you know. Another thing that Aaron did that I really, really greatly appreciate when she first came on to the to this case is that she took the time to gracefully go through the process, you know, procedural process with me and explained it to me and what to expect and what not to expect in the beginning when she first came onto the case. And not only did she do that gracefully for me, she even traveled from Columbus to Cincinnati to sit with my family and do the same thing. And I want to talk about that a little later too, about attorney-client relationships. But that was very huge for me. But I don't want to get off the point. But when she did tell me that, I was so excited that, man, I thought they was going to open the door right then and there for me. Sorry, Kevin. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But this is an important next point. It didn't, right? It wasn't just, okay, open the door. You can go home. Aaron,
Right.
tell us about the process from the time that the coroner changed her medical opinion to when Lamont, like what were the next steps? Because I do want to talk about the technicalities, because I think that's an important component to understanding this case, right? That's not the end of it, right? What happened next?
Right. And this is an important point. So like I said, we're in federal court in what's called, you know, habeas. One of the many rules in habeas is that you can only pursue a claim that the U.S. Supreme Court has clearly established as a constitutional violation. The U.S. Supreme Court has never clearly established it's unconstitutional to execute someone who is actually innocent,
That's
which is insane. But so right off the bat, I can't just go into court and say my client's innocent, right? So the whole court system is not designed for an innocent client, number one. So we've got to be creative. We've got to go at it sideways. What he does have a right to is effective counsel. So instead, I've got to say, well, his counsel didn't do his job. I got to show that he fell below the standards that he should have met. And if he had met them, then the outcome would have been different. So we have to do that, or we have to show that the prosecution, violated their obligations, that kind of thing. So that's what we were doing, and we got evidence of that. So great. So now we bring that evidence to the federal court, but guess what? We're also not allowed to pursue anything in federal court that we haven't first given the state courts a crack at, because the whole thesis behind the law that governs much of what we do is federalism. It's a big deal for the federal courts to mess around with what the state courts have done. So we're hands off unless it's really super bad. So we basically have to hit pause in federal court and then go back to state court and for the first time show all this new evidence to them and ask them to grant Lamont a new trial. So we do that. And incredibly, the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office agrees with us that Lamont should get a new trial. So we've taken a shortcut here, okay? Instead of, like we had to do in Elwood's case, as you'll learn in a couple weeks, having to have a whole big evidentiary hearing for a week where we present all the new evidence, we call witnesses and hear testimony and all that stuff, we skip all that. And so Lamont's conviction and death sentence are vacated. So he's kind of back in time to when he's first indicted. But they say, but we're still going to re-prosecute him for both the murder and the rape.
If I don't take the plea agreement.
That's right. But they offered Lamont a plea agreement. And Lamont, do you want to talk about how you felt about that and what decisions went into it?
Oh man, of course. So in the process of getting all the this good news, when I want them to open up the door for me and let me out and come, and gain my freedom. So the prosecutors gets in their mind. So we're just like Aaron just mentioned, that they wants to retry me again, and they come. I'm sorry, my brother just come up to send message that they want to offer me a plea agreement. They want to join the motion. They don't want to challenge the motion for a new trial. They just want to join it and maybe into plea negotiations. And I'm like, F you, no, I want the judge to weigh in. You guys ruined my life, and now you want to admit that you ruined, that you was there. I deserve a new trial, but you're going to retry me if I don't enter the plea negotiations with you and take a plea. And I'm like, no, I want the judge to weigh in on this, because I'm entitled, as Aaron explained to me. And at this point, I had learned that in the process, if I'm granted a new trial, the sentence is vacated and the conviction is vacated. So now I'm entitled to at least a bond hearing, So I turned them down, I didn't agree to enter negotiations with them. So at this point, I was excited, scared, all of the emotions, I was feeling. And they played games. They were still playing tricks. And, they still had their tricks and games that they were playing. And I just wanted the courts to weigh in and get what's afforded to me in the courts, which was that bond hearing coming up next.
Yeah, so we did the bond hearing, which, again, I keep referencing Elwood. Everything that happened to Lamont was 6 months after Elwood, so it was this weird deja vu. And unfortunately, they learned a few things in Elwood's case, and so they were a little bit better in Lamont's.
Yeah.
We were able to get Elwood out on bond, but they were a little better prepared for Lamont's bond hearing. But this shady stuff that Lamont is referencing, playing games, right at the last minute, the night before we were supposed to convene for a bond hearing, they asked for a continuance. And the burden is on them in a bond hearing. And so that's basically admitting they can't win the bond hearing. And so our position was, well, then you should let Lamont out on bond. And then if you later can meet your burden, you can come back and ask for him to come back in. But unfortunately, it takes a lot of courage for a judge to, put someone who is on death row out on the street. And our judge wasn't willing to do that. So he gave him a continuance. And the continuance was for all the other pathologists in the coroner's office, not the one who did the autopsy and testified at his trial and had changed her opinion, but for all the other ones to review the evidence. Because we also learned in the coroner's deposition that although she had requested all of the medical records from the hospital be sent to the coroner's office, it never happened, which, is pretty shocking. I mean, I truly believe nobody had read through those records before the investigator in our office, Pam Swanson, did. I don't, the coroner's office we know didn't. I don't think the child abuse pediatrician or the prosecutor's office did. We know his trial attorney didn't because we know he didn't do anything.
Right.
And the thing is, like, she admitted to us that, like, she was kind of new at the office at that time, and her other colleagues were sort of annoyed that she had started requesting the records because it was kind of like more work for them. So anyway, no big deal that she hadn't gotten them. But now, even though the prosecutors have known about this for months and months and months, because it was in our, new trial motion that they agreed to, all of a sudden, they need to have a chance to look at them. The other pathologists do
Right.
at this, 11th hour. So the judge lets them do that, I think very unfairly. And wouldn't you know it, that all the other pathologists signed what they call an addendum to the original autopsy report, which they admit never in the history of the Hamilton County's prosecutor's office has anything like this ever been done. And the addendum says like 4 sentences. And it basically just says, we actually do think this was homicide. We actually do think that it was, a sexual assault. And we don't agree with like the pathologist who did the autopsy changing her opinion. That's literally all it says. There is no reasoning given, no cite to any part of the records, like nothing. And none of them would talk to anyone on Lamont's team without a prosecutor being present. And then when they finally did talk to us and they started, answering some of the reasons that we were probing them with, one of the things they talked about was something about retinal hemorrhages, and I won't get into all the details, but I said, well, do you have like a source for that? Because the child abuse pediatrician had said the same thing in her deposition. And when I asked if there was literature on it, she said she didn't have it, but I said, well, please provide it, through your attorney. And she never did. And this pathologist said to me, well, I don't want to do that because I wouldn't want to do your work for you. So just stop and think for a minute about these scientists that are supposed to be providing objective testimony about evidence, clearly picking a side in this, right? And so anyway, those are the shenanigans. It ended up not mattering. We did end up winning the bond hearing and getting the right to get Lamont out on bond. Unfortunately, though, the conditions that were set on bond were very onerous. The amount of money was going to require like $50,000, I think, cash, which I don't know where anyone thought someone who's been on death row for 17 and a half years didn't have that money, and his family's been supporting him this whole time, so they don't have that money. And then also the state got the judge to impose a condition that Lamont couldn't be around anyone under the age of 18. And do you want to talk about why that was so devastating, Lamont?
Yeah, because thank you, Aaron. Yes, at the time in the courtroom when this guy, this prosecutor, who's a real character, by the way, and who just recently got fired. Is that right, Aaron? Didn't he just get fired? So he's a real character. So this guy is in the courtroom. Well, we don't think he's a threat to the community. He shouldn't be around children or this and that. Seth Teager, absolutely. He's boisterous, and my family's here in the courtroom. One of my grandchildren, I had I think maybe 10 at the time that I have 10 grandchildren at the time, all over the years that I have been incarcerated, that I haven't had the chance to meet and hold. One of them was in the courtroom, and my daughters was in the courtroom, and this prosecutor was just like, he knew me all my life. Well, he's a threat to the community. He shouldn't be around children.
He's a
He's a
monster.
monster, and this and that. My daughters, they start crying, like literally in the courtroom, like, who is he talking about? One of my daughters was holding my granddaughter, and it pissed me off so bad. Man, it just pissed me off so bad. What was the question, Aaron? I'm sorry, man.
So, so, so basically, Lamont's faced with a choice, right? He gets this bond, even if we could raise the money,
Absolutely.
right? He would be out on house arrest and not allowed to see any of his new grandchildren who, he hasn't met yet. And that was basically, I mean, that's the whole reason he wanted to get out, is to see his family, right?
With the threat of re-prosecution, and my family's still going through this with me, dragging it along for maybe another 18 months, another 2 years, who knows?
Right.
Or I sit in the county jail for that time.
Right. I mean, the county jail is horrific.
Yeah.
They're so understaffed that it's basically on lockdown like 20 hours a day.
Absolutely. And
there's no in-person visiting. It's only like through a video screen.
At least on death row, I can have contact visitation. I wasn't too far away from my family. They would travel to see me quite often. It was an hour away. At least my TV and my property and stuff is in the cell with me. I mean, it's not home, but but anyway, that county jail was just horrendous. So after contemplating the offer, which by the way, the judge mentioned in the bond hearing too, he asked the prosecutor while the prosecutor was talking. So am I correct about you guys offering Mr. Hunter a plea agreement? And the prosecutor boldly, yes, we offered Mr. Hunter a plea agreement. He won't take it. He said, well, if Mr. Hunter is such a threat to society, to the community, and why is there an offer to let him out free with no probation, no protections in place? They said, well, he won't take the plea. He never addressed that. But anyway, yeah, so after contemplating the decision and talking with my family, my team, of course, my attorneys, and Aaron was adamant that we're not going through this again. You're here. Go home. We're going home. We're getting you home. And I'm like, you know what? I want to talk to my family. I talked to my family. My family was like, what is it? There's nothing to talk about. Come home. Particularly my son, my junior, Lamont Jr., he, the night before I decided to go ahead and take the plea agreement, my son said, Daddy, it's never been about you being able to sue the county, because I was, considering, well, if I plead to anything, then there go my chances to sue for compensation, for all of the harm that they did to me and my family. So my son was like, Daddy, it's never been about no money. It's never been about money, compensation. It's always been about the truth, your name being restored back to you, and you being returned back, into the fold, into the family, you coming home. And after those conversations with my family, and particularly, like I said, my junior, man, it was a no-brainer at that point. I just cut the losses from the trauma chapter of this journey, and try to turn the page into the healing chapter of this journey with my family, because we were all traumatized.
And that's why, Lamont can't say he was exonerated, because, the state has not admitted that. But, that's why we use the term wrongfully convicted. And that's why Lamont isn't counted in that 12 number of people who've been exonerated from Ohio's death row. So there's actually, there's more. There's right. 2 more to that list, people who were wrongfully convicted and put on Ohio's death row.
Absolutely. And it's been, man, it's been a journey, man. It's anyway. I'll let the questions come.
Yeah. For the record, and for folks who may understand this concept and know a little bit about it, it's termed the dark plea, right? And what that means is it's a plea offer that's made while a case is in at some level of the post-conviction sort of proceedings. And so I'm not a lawyer. Um, however, have seen this enough times to understand that this is a little commentary on my part, so just indulge me a little bit. This is the way that um, county offices, prosecutors' offices avoid the accountability for the wrongful conviction damages case that is, maybe deserved. And so I think that, it places Lamont, as we've heard, in an impossible position, right? Fighting to show that you're innocent, that you did not do what the state says, but you're facing the very real possibility of a second trial, right? Why would you go running back into the same, court system that already wrongfully convicted you once, given that all of these, quote unquote, medical experts are saying, no, no, we really do think that there was a rape, there was a murder, despite the fact that it had been proven that had not occurred. So it put you in an impossible position. Um, I think that we can all understand how and why you would agree to that, because, as your son said, it's about you coming home. It's about you clearing your name. It's about you getting out and being with your family again.
Absolutely.
Um, so I just want to lay the name to that. It is called a dark plea, and the frequency with which that occurs is alarming. Um, but I want to pivot back a little bit to um, you know big picture. We've talked a lot about what went wrong, right? When we talk about wrongful convictions, right? There are say maybe hallmarks, right? There are specific things that we can point to in every single wrongful conviction case that occurs, right? It's a known list of things. Aaron and/or Lamont, can you talk a little bit about what those are, just so we could put that finer point on how is it possible that people get wrongfully convicted, sentenced to death for things they didn't do? Like, what are those? What are some of those factors that were involved with this case?
Yeah, I mean, I like to say Lamont kind of had like the big three. He had ineffective assistance of counsel, he had junk science, and then something that's kind of beyond the scope of this, but he also had prosecutorial misconduct. There was sort of like another sort of leg to their theory, that they accused Lamont of like abusing trust in the past, when they had documents right in their file that showed that he hadn't had contact with Trustin. Children's Services had done an investigation and Lamont was not the one who did it, yet they stood up in court and Seth Teager pointed his finger at Lamont and, said he was a monster who tortured Trustin in his basement. So, those are the big three that account for a lot of them. Junk science, I think, bleeds into some other kinds of unreliable testimony, like eyewitness identification, especially when it's cross-racial. There's other kinds of like false confessions. The national registration, the National Registry of Exonerations, keeps track of these things, as does the Innocence Project. But Lamont kind of had the trifecta.
And I want to add, there's other elements as well that's not thought about in the process of wrongful convictions. You have this rush to judgment, blinders. They have the blinders on. They don't hear. Like I told them what happened. They didn't want to hear it. They had their blinders on. They created the narrative that they wanted to create because of a system that's so bogged down uh, 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 by society, I say, because of what I've now learned about the state's attorneys, well, prosecutors across this country's um, and district attorneys across this country are protected by what I've now learned to be absolute immunity. And with the system being so bogged down what it is, and these offices so in I can't find a name for it, but they're so overzealously searching and seeking convictions. The conviction rate is at the top of their list, and they know that they're protected by this absolute immunity, so they cheat, cut corners, lie, steal, do whatever in court to get these convictions, to keep the conviction rate up. For political reasons, for personal ambitious reasons, and who knows, but um, a lot of elements that don't get talked about that goes into wrongful convictions, and I believe this element of absolute immunity incentivizes, it encourages, it bad actors. Now I know we need district attorneys' offices and prosecutors' offices in this country to, protect the communities, and but they go rogue. They're human, and to protect them with absolute immunity doesn't do nobody justice, because you have cases, people like myself, and cases like mine that slip through the cracks of the legal system. That's unacceptable. We have to do something about this absolute immunity. It encourages bad behavior. I just wanted to bring that element of into the conversation.
Yeah, that that lack of accountability is a huge problem. I mean, the only way to hold prosecutors' offices accountable is the elected prosecutor. And that's way down on the ballot. A lot of people don't even vote for the judges. And so, that's something that like every citizen can, make a difference by learning about their prosecutors. This case is out of Hamilton County, where there's been a big shift. We have a new prosecutor down there who's a Democrat for the first time in decades, and
a woman.
Yes, and a woman. And just a few weeks ago, she exonerated Elwood Jones after 30 years on death row, and basically said, like, my office doesn't cheat. But the previous office did. They withheld almost 4,000 pages of material from Elwood that would have helped him prove his case, 30 years ago. And so, that referendums like that, make a difference. And she's promising to have a conviction integrity unit that's run, according to best practices and national standards, so that kind of thing matters, but it's not one that's on most people's radar. Something else that I think, this is all tricky, right? There's not just like one fix, because if there was, we could have done it. But something else that is like pretty complicated is the fact that, almost everyone who's on death row is indigent. They can't afford their own attorney. And so the courts appoint the attorneys for them. And specifically, the judge who's overseeing the trial appoints the attorney for that client. And some attorneys, that's basically like their whole livelihood is getting court appointments. Or maybe they are retained by some and get appointed for other, but it's a big part of their income. And so there's this perverse incentive for those appointed attorneys who want to get further appointments in the future from that judge to not tick the judge off, basically, right? To do enough, but not rock the boat. And when you've got a high stakes case like this, I mean, we'll never know because they didn't, Lamont's attorney didn't ask. But think of who I mentioned. We had a forensic pathologist, we had a biomechanical engineer. A lot of times you need to have, an ophthalmologist to talk about the retinal hemorrhaging in this kind of case. You got to bring big guns in. And like an appointed attorney might be afraid of asking for all of that of the judge. Or you might be in a small county that doesn't have the money for it. And if that attorney is harassing the judge and really vigorously advocating, the judge might say, like, forget it. I'm taking him off my appointment list.
Right.
And so the Supreme Court of Ohio's Death Penalty Task Force, has a whole bunch of recommendations that have never been implemented. And one of them identified that maybe there should be an outside committee, not the judge who's literally, signing your paycheck, who appoints them so that there's not a conflict there. So that's one example I think that's, kind of below the radar that it leads to a lot of what might not raise to the level of reversible constitutional ineffective assistance, but still is like not what you need, not what any of us would want if we're on trial for our life.
Absolutely. And about that dark plea, Kevin, you talked
Yeah.
about those it's like I felt the pressure of that, the weight of that. It's like the prosecutor, the state was like leveraging my life, my freedom, over my head. You take this plea, you can walk free. You can walk free right now if you just take this plea agreement. Which is so unfair to an innocent person. It's just so many elements that I could think of, man, and that could help the system be better.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to dig into those in the next couple of conversations. And before we're getting close to the part where we want to turn it over for some questions and answer. But before we do that, I just want to add, this is forgive me, this is a personal indulgence, but Lamont, can you talk about something, whether it was small or big, when you were ultimately released? I think it was June of 2023, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you ultimately came home. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. Oh man. First of all, I want to say I was released June 15th, which is the amazing Erin's birthday. So she had a great birthday gift for her. um, and ironically, I was convicted 16 years before that. On June, was I sentenced or convicted?
Convicted.
Convicted. Yeah, I was sentenced on September. Yeah. So 16 years before that, I was convicted June 15th. That's just a little note and a point I just wanted to point out. But anyway, oh man, Kevin, wow. Coming back out, the world, I sat in there for 17 and a half, almost 18 years. The world had went on without me. Walking back out here, it was sort of like a movie. Um, I had Erin there, who has been a great advocate and a great, even better friend to me. My family, my so adjusting has been like a roller coaster. Had its ups and downs, and it still does. But like my grandchildren, like I mentioned earlier, I had 10 at the time when I had came out. Now I've got 13 grandchildren. I'm such a blessed man. So I can't say it's really, a lot of people take for granted having access to your grandchildren. I I don't, and it's small and it's huge to me. Um, that's one thing. Of course, reconnecting with my children, but this technology, oh my God. When I came home, people are talking to their remote controls, their refrigerators, their faucets in the kitchen, all this voice command stuff. It's weird still to me. I still haven't caught up. I've been home 2.5 years now. So it's been a roller coaster ride, Kevin. It's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of firsts in my life, um, a lot of setbacks, and I just look at the world is man, oh man, it's I don't know. the glass is half full instead of half empty for me. I got a lot more living to do.
Yeah, good for you.
Thank you.
Well, as we kind of shift gears a little bit to field some questions, I first want to ask my colleagues who are with us to put into the chat a link to there's a GoFundMe page for Lamont, and the reason that we want folks to know about that is you had to choose a pathway that would bring you home, and that necessarily meant that it closed the door to any compensation that you would be potentially able to pursue. And so, there's not much I can do except ask and encourage folks to check that out.
Thank you. Thank you.
To give generously to folks that are able to. But it's really important that, even though the state of Ohio is never really going to right the wrong, we're going to do everything that we can to do that. And part of this conversation is to bring that to the forefront. So I think we're about time to shift to some of the questions. And I am stalling for a little bit of time because I think that my colleagues are going to be feeding some of those questions to me,
Okay.
if that's correct. So the first question is, um, well, I'm sorry, this may not be the first question, but this is the first one that popped into my chat. Did the prosecutor offer a plea agreement in the original case, like the original first time through? That's the first part of the question.
So let me talk about that a little bit. Um, while I was there in the county jail, I had been sitting there for maybe a year or something when my attorney who represented me, he had went to talk to them without my knowledge about this, and I found out. One of my children's mother mentioned it to me on a visit, and she said, "Did you know that they are you gonna plead guilty to this, or are you gonna take a plea to this? Because they said your prosecutor went to talk. I mean, the attorney went to talk to the prosecutor, and they're offering 15 years to life." And I said, I never heard anything about that. And I approached, confronted my attorney about it. He said, "Hey, Lamont, it's just what we do. We have to conversate with them, to see what uh, what's in their trick bags or whatever." I said, "Well, I don't authorize you to make no plea agreements on my behalf." So that was a brief, but I shut it down. There's no way I was going to plead guilty to something I didn't do until after serving almost 18 years on death row.
And then, yeah, the plea that Lamont took was to time served, and it was just to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. So there was no charge of, any sort of sexual assault or anything like that.
Okay, thanks for answering that question. Next question. Let's see what's in the chat. Do, 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 do. So while waiting for another question, Lamont, can you talk a little bit about life moving forward? I mean, you clearly your grandchildren are important to you, your children is important to you, your family is important to you. What are you looking to do moving forward?
Oh man, experience life like I've never experienced it before. Like I just mentioned earlier, there's a lot of firsts since I um, came home. I've never flew on an airplane before. I've done that. Uh, I've never. Oh, I've never been to a beach before. I've never seen the ocean before. I want to do that. There's so many things, man. I want to experience. I want to experience different cultures, different traditions, see the world, man. I've never done before. Um, like I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, that I worked for a seal coating company, an asphalt company, in 2006 when this happened. I am now um, back at the same company, working. Um, the future is bright, man. I look at it as the future is bright. Uh, Although it's seasonal, the work is just seasonal. Like right now, I'm struggling trying to get approved for unemployment. So I've been struggling trying to pay my bills. So, but that don't deter me from looking at the world and life as being bright for me. I at least have a chance, you know.
Aaron, I don't necessarily mean to put you on the spot, but can you talk a little bit about the creative ways that folks might be able to help that are beyond maybe like the a GoFundMe? Aren't there some things?
Yeah, so because I am not an innocence lawyer, I represent, people on death row, no matter what their cases are. My office, unfortunately, isn't able to fund Lamont traveling places. So, the Ohio Innocence Project is able to pay for their clients when they want to travel to like the Innocence Conference. But the federal government does not budget for that, unfortunately. So, Lamont would love to go to the Innocence conference this year in April, which is in Chicago, which luckily we could, drive there. But, we need to find a way to pay for his hotel stay there. And so in the past, when we went to New Orleans, we were fortunate enough to have some people donate points for him to be able to do that. And so the conference hotel is a Hyatt, but I was looking up, and Hyatt also takes points from like several different airlines, or if we can't get Hyatt points, maybe we'll stay at a hotel across the street that takes Marriott points or something like that. So that's something that, some people maybe for their job have a lot of points saved up. And if you'd be interested in sharing some of those so Lamont can attend this year, that would be amazing. You can just reach out to me and we can work on coordinating that. I think my email will be in the chat for that purpose. And then also, Lamont is amazing at talking about his story. I think everyone would agree. And so that's another way he earns money is, honorariums for talks like this, which, sometimes they're $50, sometimes they're a couple $100s. And we've traveled to, colleges and law schools and, attorney conferences. But he talks about his story. He obviously, I think, is a great motivational speaker, has a lot of
Thank,
perspective
thank you.
on, often he gets asked like, how come he's not bitter? And he has a great perspective on like, what good would that do and everything. So, if you, your work or, a friend or family or colleague, think there might be, an opportunity to invite Lamont in person or even virtually like this, to speak somewhere, you can reach out to me or you can find Lamont as well. He has a LinkedIn page. So that's a way you can help too. And also it's great to, raise awareness about all the important aspects of his case and this flawed system we have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Well, last call for questions, folks. If you have questions, then do send those now. We'll give about 30 seconds or so. If there are no other questions, then I'm first of all, just thank you both so much for spending some time with us tonight. The part of the reason why I think it's so important that as many people as possible can understand and know about what happened, it's just vitally important because the reason that folks have turned their back on the death penalty and the reason that it's underwater in terms of public support is because of wrongful convictions.
Yes.
The sidebar issue there is these sort of tactics and these things that prosecutors do to try to uphold the conviction at any and all costs, right? And that, in this instance, really meant putting Lamont in an impossible position where he can leave, but he has to agree that he committed some other offense, thereby closing the door for those kinds of wrongful conviction compensation. So the system is beyond broken. The good news, though, for us in Ohio is there's legislation that's pending that would end the death penalty. There's
Yeah.
legislation in both the
Yep.
House and the Senate. And the other thing is later this month, while we're not sure when, Governor DeWine is going to make an announcement about the death penalty. There's some speculation going around what might that look like, what might that be. This is tea leaf reading on my part, but I think the governor probably has changed his mind on the death penalty and probably no longer supports it. And that's really important because it comes from, a politician, in this case, the governor, who, at the time in 1981, as a state legislator, voted for the current death penalty. And so to see that kind of evolution, I think it's really important. And a lot of that evolution has taken place because of the damaging impact on individuals who are wrongfully convicted, and the regularity that the state makes mistakes. Evidence is covered, evidence is withheld, all of the things that go into a wrongful conviction. This is a great time for folks who care about the death penalty to be in touch with their state legislators about supporting legislation to end the death penalty. So, Aaron, Lamont, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciated the conversation, and I wish both of you a pleasant evening. And when